Hey guys, tonight we begin with something calm, something quietly fascinating, and honestly, something most people walk past every day without even realizing it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights a little, maybe lower the brightness on your screen, let the room become quiet, and just relax for a moment. Tonight, we are slowly drifting back nearly 2,000 years into the world of ancient Rome, a civilization people usually imagine as loud and dramatic, full of shouting emperors, gladiators fighting in dusty arenas, and senators arguing endlessly in marble buildings. But if you step away from all of that noise for a moment and quietly walk through the streets of a Roman city in the early evening, something else begins to appear. You notice the stone road under your feet. You hear water gently flowing in a fountain somewhere in the square. You pass a bathhouse where steam rises slowly into the cool night air. And after a few minutes, it becomes very clear that the Romans had a strange personality trait as a civilization. They loved solving practical problems, small problems, big problems, inconvenient problems that made daily life annoying. And sometimes they solved those problems so effectively that the rest of the world ended up copying them for the next 2,000 years. One of the first things you would notice walking through the Roman world would be the roads, because the Romans had a slightly obsessive relationship with roads. They built them everywhere, and not just simple dirt paths either. Roman roads were carefully engineered pieces of infrastructure, which sounds like a boring phrase until you realize just how much effort went into them. Workers would first dig a deep trench along the planned route, then fill that trench with layers of sand, gravel, and crushed rock, carefully packing each layer down to create a solid base. On top of this foundation, they placed large flat stones fitted together almost like a puzzle, creating a surface that could survive rain, heavy carts, and constant traffic for decades. The road was slightly curved in the middle so that rainwater would run off toward drainage ditches on the sides, which prevented flooding and mud buildup. It was an elegant solution to a problem that had frustrated travelers for centuries. Before the Romans arrived, long-distance travel across much of Europe was slow and unpredictable. A rainy week could turn a dirt path into an impassable swamp. But Roman roads remained solid and usable in almost any weather, which meant traders, soldiers, messengers, and ordinary travelers could move across the empire with surprising reliability. By the height of the Roman Empire, there were more than 250,000 miles of roads stretching across Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. It was basically the ancient version of an international highway system, except built entirely by hand with stone and determination. And these roads quietly changed the world in ways people rarely think about. When travel becomes easier, information travels faster too. Merchants carry new goods between regions. Doctors learn medical ideas from distant cities. Farmers discover improved tools and farming techniques. Even simple things like new foods and cooking styles begin spreading across long distances. Roman roads made the empire feel connected in a way that earlier civilizations rarely experienced. Messages that once took months to deliver could now travel far more quickly, carried by riders who moved along carefully maintained routes from one station to the next. It created a slow but steady flow of communication that helped stabilize one of the largest empires in history. And, interestingly, many modern roads in Europe still follow the paths first laid down by Roman engineers nearly 2,000 years ago. Which means if you ever drive through parts of Italy, France, or Britain, there is a very good chance that somewhere beneath the asphalt is an old Roman road quietly doing the exact same job it has done since the days of emperors and togas. Of course, travelers moving across those roads eventually reached cities, and Roman cities had another challenge that required clever thinking. Cities need water, and lots of it. Drinking water, washing water, for cooking, cleaning, fountains, and especially the Roman obsession with public baths. Roman bathhouses were not just small neighborhood pools. Some were enormous social complexes with hot rooms, warm rooms, cold plunge pools, exercise spaces, and gardens where people could relax for hours. All of that required an astonishing amount of fresh water every single day. The Romans solved this problem with one of the most elegant engineering systems of the ancient world, the aqueduct. At first glance, aqueducts look dramatic and impressive, long rows of stone arches stretching across valleys like giant bridges. But the true genius of the aqueduct was actually very quiet and simple. It used gravity. Roman engineers located clean water sources, usually springs or rivers high in the hills surrounding a city, and then built a gently sloping channel that carried the water toward the city center. The slope had to be incredibly precise. Too steep and the water would rush too quickly, damaging the channel. Too flat and the water would simply stop flowing. So Roman engineers measured the landscape carefully, sometimes allowing the water to drop only a few inches over an entire mile of distance. The water moved slowly through stone-lined channels, sometimes underground, sometimes across elevated bridges, and eventually arrived at large storage tanks inside the city. From those storage tanks, the water was distributed through pipes to fountains, baths, and public buildings. At its peak, the city of Rome itself received hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh water every single day, which made it one of the cleanest large cities in the ancient world. People could gather drinking water from public fountains, wash regularly in bathhouses, and maintain a level of hygiene that many medieval cities would not achieve again for over 1,000 years. It's one of those quiet historical ironies. We often imagine ancient life as extremely dirty and primitive, yet in some ways Roman cities had better water systems than many European cities in the 1700s. Clean water meant fewer diseases spreading through contaminated wells, and it allowed large populations to live together more safely. In a very calm and practical way, the aqueduct became one of the inventions that helped save countless lives simply by making clean water easy to access. And once you have a lot of clean water flowing into a city, another problem appears almost immediately. Waste has to go somewhere. Ancient cities around the world often struggled with this issue. Without proper waste management, garbage and sewage pile up quickly, creating terrible smells and even worse health problems. The Romans, being the practical engineers they were, decided that the best solution was to simply build an enormous underground drainage system to carry waste away from the city. One of the most famous examples was the Cloaca Maxima, which translated very directly means the Great Sewer. The name might not sound particularly poetic, but it was extremely accurate. The Cloaca Maxima began as a drainage project designed to remove swamp water from the early Roman settlement. Over time, it expanded into a massive sewer network that carried rainwater and waste through underground tunnels and eventually emptied it into the Tiber River. These tunnels were so large that in some sections a person could actually walk through them, and parts of the system are still functioning today after more than 2,000 years. Roman public toilets were connected to these sewers, allowing waste to be flushed away by running water, which again improved sanitation across the city. It was not perfect by modern standards, but compared to many ancient cities, it was remarkably advanced. So when you step back and look at these inventions together, Roman roads, aqueducts, and sewer systems, you begin to see a pattern. None of them were flashy inventions designed to impress people with dramatic spectacle. They were practical solutions to everyday problems. How do we travel more easily? How do we bring clean water into crowded cities? How do we keep those cities clean and healthy? The Romans approached these questions with patience, engineering skill, and a surprising amount of long-term planning. And because of that, their quiet ideas shaped the foundations of modern infrastructure in ways most people rarely think about. Roads connecting distant places, running water flowing through pipes, and sanitation systems keeping cities clean are all ideas that trace their roots back to Roman innovation, which is a pretty remarkable legacy for a civilization that many people remember mainly for gladiators and emperors behaving badly. And slowly, as we continue drifting through the quieter side of Roman history, we begin to notice even more inventions that shaped the modern world in small but powerful ways. Because the Romans were not finished solving problems yet, not even close. In fact, some of their most useful inventions were still waiting quietly around the corner, ready to change how people built cities, treated injuries, and even told time itself. As the evening in our quiet Roman city continues, the streets slowly grow calmer. The merchants are closing their stalls, the bathhouses are beginning to empty, and somewhere in the distance, a fountain continues its steady, gentle trickle of water. It is the kind of sound that fades into the background after a while, becoming part of the rhythm of the city itself. And that steady flow of water is a small reminder that Roman engineers had a habit of improving everyday life in ways that were almost invisible. Their inventions were rarely dramatic or flashy. They simply worked. They made daily life a little easier, a little safer, and occasionally a lot less miserable. And because these ideas worked so well, they quietly survived long after the Roman Empire itself faded away. One of the most important examples of this quiet Roman genius was something so ordinary that most people today never think about it at all: concrete. Modern cities are full of concrete. Roads, bridges, sidewalks, apartment buildings, parking garages, and countless other structures rely on it every single day. Yet the version of concrete that changed the ancient world first appeared in Roman construction. Roman engineers discovered that mixing volcanic ash with lime and water created a material that was incredibly strong and durable. Even more interesting, this mixture could harden underwater, which opened up an entire new range of building possibilities. Harbors, piers, bridges, and massive foundations could suddenly be built in places where traditional stone construction would have struggled. The Romans used this material everywhere. Temples, bathhouses, aqueducts, warehouses, apartment buildings, and enormous public arenas all relied on Roman concrete. Some of these structures were so well built that they still stand today, quietly weathering centuries of storms and earthquakes. The famous Pantheon in Rome, with its enormous domed roof, is a perfect example. The dome was poured using Roman concrete nearly 2,000 years ago, and it remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world even now. It is a strange and slightly humbling thought that modern engineers sometimes study Roman concrete formulas to understand how they managed to make something so durable. In some cases, Roman concrete has actually survived longer than modern versions, which is a mildly embarrassing fact for contemporary construction companies. Another Roman innovation that quietly changed the world was central heating, or at least an early version of it. Anyone who has experienced winter in Europe knows that cold stone buildings can become extremely uncomfortable once temperatures drop. The Romans decided they were not particularly interested in freezing indoors, especially while relaxing in their famous bathhouses. Their solution was a system called the hypocaust, which was essentially an ancient form of underfloor heating. In buildings equipped with this system, the floors were raised slightly above the ground using small pillars made of brick or stone. A furnace located outside the room produced hot air and smoke, which traveled through the empty space beneath the floor. As the warm air circulated, it heated the floor above, gently warming the entire room. It was a surprisingly effective system. Warm air would also rise through hollow clay pipes inside the walls, heating the structure evenly from the ground upward. Bathhouses used hypocaust systems to keep their hot rooms comfortably warm, but wealthy Roman homes sometimes installed them as well. The result was a level of indoor comfort that many people in medieval Europe would not experience again for over 1,000 years. While most medieval castles were cold, drafty places where residents wore heavy clothing indoors, Roman wealth had already experimented with something very similar to modern central heating. It was another quiet example of Roman practicality. If something could be made more comfortable, they were willing to design an engineering solution to achieve it. Of course, comfort inside buildings was only part of Roman daily life. People still needed to navigate the busy streets outside, especially in large cities like Rome itself. And as cities grew more crowded, traffic began to cause predictable problems. Carts, horses, pedestrians, and street vendors all competed for space in narrow roads that had originally been designed centuries earlier. The Romans eventually realized that organizing traffic might make city life slightly less chaotic. So they introduced something surprisingly familiar to modern drivers: traffic rules. In fact, some Roman streets were designated as one-way roads during busy hours of the day, allowing carts to move more efficiently through crowded districts. Certain heavy vehicles were even banned from entering the city during daylight hours to reduce congestion. It sounds very modern, but Roman officials understood that infrastructure only works well when people follow organized systems. By controlling traffic flow, they made travel through the city faster and safer. There were also raised stepping stones placed across some streets, allowing pedestrians to cross muddy roads without stepping directly into the path of carts. These stones functioned almost like early crosswalks, spaced just far enough apart for wagon wheels to pass between them. It was a simple but clever design that made city life noticeably easier for ordinary people moving through busy streets. Another Roman innovation involved time itself. In a large empire spread across thousands of miles, coordinating activities required a shared understanding of the day. Earlier civilizations used sundials to track the movement of the sun, but the Romans refined and expanded this practice. Public sundials were installed in many cities, often placed in central squares where people gathered. They allowed citizens to roughly track the hours of the day, helping merchants schedule market activity and officials organize public events. Over time, the Romans also developed water clocks, which measured time through the slow dripping of water between containers. These devices were particularly useful at night when sundials could not function. Timekeeping might seem like a small detail, but it helped structure daily life across the empire. Courts opened at specific hours, markets operated within scheduled periods, and military routines followed predictable time patterns. In a society managing millions of people across vast territories, even a modest system of shared timekeeping helped maintain order and coordination. Once again, the Romans were solving practical problems with quiet consistency. Medicine was another field where Roman innovations quietly helped save lives. Roman doctors inherited much of their medical knowledge from Greek physicians, but the Roman military created an environment where that knowledge could be tested and improved rapidly. Soldiers stationed across the empire frequently suffered injuries during training, construction work, and occasional battles. Treating those injuries efficiently became a priority. As a result, the Romans established some of the earliest organized military hospitals known as valetudinaria. These facilities provided spaces where injured soldiers could recover under the supervision of trained medical staff. The hospitals were carefully planned. They included separate rooms for patients, storage areas for medical equipment, and courtyards that allowed fresh air and sunlight into the buildings. Roman surgeons developed specialized tools for procedures such as removing arrowheads, setting broken bones, and performing basic surgeries. Many of these tools look surprisingly familiar to modern doctors, which again highlights the practical mindset of Roman medicine. The goal was not theoretical experimentation, but practical treatment that returned soldiers to health as quickly as possible. Over time, these medical practices influenced healthcare systems throughout the empire. Even small conveniences received Roman attention. One example was the widespread use of glass windows. Earlier buildings often used wooden shutters or thin sheets of animal hide to block wind and rain. Roman glassmakers improved production techniques that allowed thin sheets of glass to be installed in window frames, particularly in bathhouses and wealthy homes. This allowed natural light to enter buildings while still protecting the interior from weather. It might seem like a minor luxury today, but at the time it represented a significant improvement in indoor comfort and visibility. By now, a quiet pattern has become clear. Roman innovation rarely aimed for dramatic spectacle. Instead, it focused on solving everyday problems step by step. Roads improved travel. Aqueducts delivered clean water. Sewers protected public health. Concrete allowed massive buildings to stand for centuries. Heating systems kept rooms warm during cold seasons. Traffic rules organized crowded streets. Timekeeping helped coordinate daily life, and hospitals treated injuries with practical care. None of these inventions were glamorous. No emperor stood on a balcony dramatically announcing the creation of the sewer system. Yet these systems quietly supported millions of people across the Roman world. They allowed cities to grow larger, healthier, and more organized than most earlier civilizations could manage. And as our slow evening walk through Roman innovation continues, we will soon discover even more examples of this calm engineering mindset. Because the Romans were also quietly experimenting with postal systems, surgical techniques, firefighting equipment, and even early forms of newspapers. Each invention added another small improvement to daily life, and together those improvements helped shape the foundation of the modern world in ways that still surround us today. As the night deepens over our imaginary Roman city, the noise fades a little more. The streets are calmer now. A few lanterns glow softly along the roads. Somewhere in the distance, a cart slowly rattles over stone pavement before disappearing around a corner. And if you pause for a moment in this quiet scene, you begin to notice something interesting about the Roman world. It was not only built with clever inventions, but also with systems designed to keep those inventions working smoothly day after day. The Romans were not simply inventors, they were organizers. They believed that once a good idea existed, it needed structure, maintenance, and careful management in order to continue helping people. And this practical mindset produced some of the most quietly important systems in human history. One of the most impressive of these systems was the Roman postal network. Today, sending a message across a country is something we barely think about. Emails travel instantly, packages arrive within days, and communication across continents happens constantly. But in the ancient world, delivering a message over long distances was often slow and unreliable. Before organized systems existed, a letter might be handed to a traveler or merchant heading in roughly the right direction, and then perhaps passed along again later if the original carrier changed course. It was a messy process that left plenty of room for delays, lost letters, or simple misunderstandings. The Romans decided they could do better than that. So they created a structured delivery system known as the cursus publicus, which roughly translates to the public road service. It was essentially the ancient Roman version of a government postal network. Messages from officials, military commanders, and administrators needed to travel quickly between cities scattered across the enormous Roman Empire. To make this possible, the Romans established relay stations along their carefully built road network. At these stations, fresh horses and riders waited to carry messages forward. A messenger would arrive at one station, hand over the letter, and another rider would immediately continue the journey using a new horse. This relay system allowed important messages to travel surprisingly fast for the ancient world. News from distant provinces could sometimes reach Rome in just a few days, which was remarkable considering the vast distances involved. It allowed the Roman government to coordinate military movements, manage taxes, respond to emergencies, and maintain control over territories that stretched across 3 continents. Without this organized communication system, the empire might have struggled to function as a unified state for as long as it did. Of course, communication was not the only challenge faced by large Roman cities. Fires were another serious concern. Ancient cities were often crowded places, filled with wooden structures, cooking fires, oil lamps, and narrow streets. Once a fire started, it could spread quickly and cause devastating damage. Rome itself experienced several major fires during its long history, and each disaster reminded city officials that prevention and response systems were necessary. In response to this threat, the Romans developed one of the earliest organized firefighting forces. These firefighters were known as the vigiles. Established during the reign of Emperor Augustus, the vigiles acted as a combined firefighting and night watch unit responsible for protecting the city. They patrolled the streets after dark, watching for suspicious activity and keeping an eye out for smoke or flames. If a fire did break out, they responded with buckets, pumps, hooks, and other tools designed to control the blaze. Their equipment might seem simple by modern standards, but it represented an organized approach to disaster response that was relatively advanced for the time. Some teams used hand-powered pumps that could spray water onto flames, while others pulled down burning structures to prevent fires from spreading further. The presence of trained responders meant that fires could sometimes be contained before they consumed entire neighborhoods. It was another example of the Roman belief that organized systems could reduce the risks of everyday life. And speaking of everyday life, another quiet Roman invention helped keep citizens informed about events happening around them. In a large city like Rome, information mattered. People wanted to know about political decisions, public celebrations, legal announcements, and even local gossip. To meet this need, the Romans created something that looked surprisingly similar to a modern newspaper. This system was called the Acta Diurna, which translates roughly to daily acts or daily records. Government scribes would record important announcements, court decisions, public notices, and news about events across the empire. These records were then displayed on public boards in busy areas of the city, where people could gather and read them. Citizens passing through the forum might stop for a moment to catch up on recent developments, learning about new laws or upcoming festivals. While the Acta Diurna was not printed and distributed like modern newspapers, it served a similar purpose by sharing information with the public on a regular basis. It allowed citizens to stay informed about the activities of their government and the events shaping their society. In a quiet way, it was one of the earliest examples of organized public news reporting. The Romans also paid attention to another important aspect of daily life that is easy to overlook today: personal security during the night. Cities after dark could become unpredictable places. Without streetlights or modern policing, nighttime travel sometimes carried risks. To address this issue, Roman authorities organized night patrols responsible for maintaining order while most citizens slept.
Their presence added a layer of stability to urban life. Residents knew that someone was monitoring the streets during the quiet hours of the night, which allowed markets, workshops, and homes to operate with greater confidence during the day. Once again, it was not a glamorous invention, it was simply an organized solution to a practical problem. And even the Roman approach to public entertainment showed their practical engineering mindset. The enormous amphitheaters and arenas built across the empire required careful planning to manage large crowds safely. Structures like the Colosseum were designed with wide corridors, multiple entrances, and carefully arranged seating sections that allowed tens of thousands of people to enter or leave the building surprisingly quickly. The Romans understood that crowd control was essential in massive public spaces. Their architectural solutions allowed spectators to move efficiently through the building without creating dangerous congestion. Many modern stadiums still use similar design principles today. Multiple entrances, layered seating sections, and clearly marked pathways help manage large audiences safely and comfortably. The Romans developed these ideas centuries ago simply because they needed practical solutions for large public gatherings. And so, as we continue our slow exploration of Roman ingenuity, the pattern becomes even clearer. The Romans did not always invent entirely new technologies. Sometimes their greatest contribution was organizing existing ideas into reliable systems that worked on a large scale. Roads were connected into networks. Communication became structured through relay stations. Fire protection developed into organized patrol units. Public information was shared through daily announcements. Security improved through night watches. Each of these systems addressed a small but important challenge of urban life. When combined, they created cities that were more stable, more organized, and more comfortable than many earlier civilizations had experienced. The result was a society where millions of people could live, trade, travel, and communicate within a surprisingly efficient framework. And yet, even with all these practical solutions in place, the Romans were still experimenting with new ways to improve everyday life. Some of their next ideas would influence architecture, public health, and even the way people relax and socialize together. Quiet innovations continued appearing across the empire, often introduced without dramatic fanfare. Because for the Romans, invention was rarely about sudden breakthroughs. It was about steady improvement, one problem at a time, one practical solution after another. And as our slow journey through Roman ingenuity continues, we will soon see how these calm and thoughtful ideas quietly helped shape the world we live in today.
By now, the night in our quiet Roman city has grown deeper. The last groups of people are drifting home through narrow streets, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone walls. A few lamps still glow in the distance, casting warm pools of light onto the roads that Roman engineers built so carefully centuries earlier. Somewhere, a fountain continues its gentle rhythm, endlessly pouring water that has traveled many miles through the aqueduct system before arriving here. And if you take a slow walk through the sleeping city, it becomes clear that the Romans were not only interested in building strong infrastructure or efficient systems, they were also surprisingly focused on comfort. Not luxury in the dramatic sense of gold statues and marble palaces, although they certainly had those too, but the quieter kind of comfort that makes everyday life smoother and more pleasant. One of the most interesting examples of this mindset appears in Roman apartment buildings. As cities like Rome grew larger and more crowded, housing became a challenge. Not everyone could live in spacious villas with gardens and courtyards. Most ordinary citizens lived in multi-story apartment buildings known as insulae. These buildings were sometimes quite tall, rising 5 or 6 stories above the busy streets below. While the upper levels could be cramped and occasionally uncomfortable, the concept itself represented a practical solution to urban crowding. By building upward rather than outward, the Romans created housing for thousands of residents within limited city space. Inside these buildings, people relied on many of the Roman innovations that had quietly transformed urban life. Public fountains provided fresh water nearby. Public baths offered a place to wash and relax. Sewers carried waste away from crowded neighborhoods. Roads allowed merchants to bring food and goods into the city efficiently. All of these inventions worked together to support the daily routines of ordinary Roman citizens. Life was still challenging by modern standards, of course, but compared to many earlier civilizations, Roman cities were surprisingly organized places. Perhaps the best example of Roman attention to everyday comfort was the public bathhouse. Roman baths were not simply places to clean the body, they were social centers where people gathered to talk, exercise, read, and relax. A typical bath complex included several different rooms designed for specific temperatures. Visitors usually began in a warm room called the tepidarium, allowing the body to adjust gradually. From there, they might move into the hot room, the caldarium, where steam filled the air and heated floors warmed the feet thanks to the hypocaust system we discussed earlier. Finally, many bathers ended their visit in the frigidarium, a cool room with a cold pool that refreshed the body after the heat. These bathhouses were open to a wide range of people. Wealthy citizens certainly enjoyed them, but entrance fees were often low enough for ordinary residents as well. Some emperors even paid the fees for the public so that anyone could enter for free. It meant that bathing, relaxation, and social conversation became part of everyday life across Roman society. In many ways, the baths functioned like community centers where people could gather regardless of social status. And the scale of some bathhouses was truly remarkable. The baths of Caracalla in Rome covered enormous areas filled with pools, gardens, libraries, exercise spaces, and walking paths. Thousands of people could visit at the same time. All of this required enormous quantities of water, sophisticated heating systems, and careful architectural planning. Yet to the Romans, it was simply another way of improving the quality of urban life. Another quiet innovation that supported Roman comfort involved food distribution. Feeding a large city is never easy. Rome itself eventually reached a population of over 1 million people, which created an enormous demand for grain, vegetables, olive oil, and other basic foods. To prevent shortages and unrest, Roman authorities developed a system for importing and distributing grain from distant provinces, particularly Egypt and North Africa. Ships carried vast quantities of grain across the Mediterranean Sea to Roman ports. From there, it was transported into the city and stored in large warehouses. The government then distributed grain to many citizens through a program sometimes called the grain dole. While this system had political motivations, it also helped stabilize food supplies for the urban population. Reliable access to food meant fewer riots, less panic during shortages, and a more stable society overall. Transportation across the empire also continued improving. Roman engineers designed bridges that allowed roads to cross rivers safely and efficiently. These bridges were often constructed from stone arches, a design that distributed weight evenly and allowed structures to remain standing for centuries. Some Roman bridges are still in use today, quietly carrying modern vehicles across rivers, just as they once carried Roman carts and travelers. Harbors also benefited from Roman engineering. Using their durable concrete, builders created strong piers and breakwaters that protected ships from rough waves. These harbors allowed trade to flourish across the Mediterranean world. Goods such as grain, wine, olive oil, spices, and textiles moved regularly between distant regions. Trade networks connected farmers, merchants, and craftsmen across vast distances, creating an economic system that supported millions of people. Even small conveniences were not ignored. Roman streets often included raised sidewalks that separated pedestrians from carts and animals moving through the roadway. This simple design made walking through the city safer and cleaner, particularly after rain, when the streets could become muddy.
Public fountains were placed at convenient locations so residents could collect water without traveling long distances. Markets were organized into specific districts where particular goods were sold, helping shoppers find what they needed easier. It might sound like a long list of ordinary improvements, and in many ways that is exactly what it is. Roman innovation rarely aimed to amaze people with dramatic inventions. Instead, it focused on gradually improving the small details of daily life. A better road here, a cleaner water supply there, a more comfortable bathhouse, a more organized marketplace, a safer bridge across a river. Each improvement solved a practical problem that people encountered every day. When these solutions were combined across an entire empire, the result was a remarkably stable and functional society. Cities grew larger, trade expanded, and communication improved. Ordinary citizens could travel, work, bathe, and shop within systems designed to keep things running smoothly. It was not a perfect world, of course, but the Roman approach to practical engineering allowed millions of people to live together in complex urban environments more comfortably than many earlier civilizations had managed. And yet, the Romans were still experimenting. New ideas continued appearing in fields like architecture, engineering, and public administration. Some inventions were large and obvious, like enormous amphitheaters or aqueducts stretching across valleys. Others were so small and practical that they blended quietly into the background of daily life. As we continue drifting through this calm exploration of Roman innovation, we will soon encounter more of these quiet achievements. Some will involve the way Romans built their cities, while others will reveal how they managed public health and education across the empire. Each one adds another piece to the story of how a civilization known for its emperors and armies also became one of history's most practical problem-solving societies.
By this point in our slow walk through the Roman world, the city has grown almost completely silent. The busy markets are long closed. The bathhouses have emptied. Only the quiet sound of water moving through fountains and channels remains, flowing steadily through systems that Roman engineers carefully designed centuries earlier. And while the streets appear calm on the surface, beneath them lies an invisible network of ideas and inventions that helped cities function in ways that were remarkably advanced for the ancient world. The Romans may be remembered for their emperors, armies, and dramatic political stories, but their true long-term influence often came from much quieter achievements. These were the systems and inventions that made daily life stable, predictable, and manageable for millions of people. One of the most important of these ideas involved city planning. Roman cities were rarely allowed to grow in a completely random way. Instead, engineers and surveyors often designed new settlements using a grid pattern. Streets were laid out in straight lines that crossed each other at right angles, creating organized blocks where homes, shops, and public buildings could be constructed efficiently. Two main streets usually formed the backbone of the city. One ran north to south, while the other ran east to west. Where they crossed, the Romans often placed the central forum, which served as the main public square. Markets, government buildings, and temples gathered around this central area, creating a natural gathering place for citizens. This grid system might sound simple, but it solved many problems at once. Straight roads allowed easier navigation for travelers. Organized blocks made construction more predictable. Infrastructure like sewers and water pipes could be installed in a planned layout rather than squeezed awkwardly between irregular buildings. In many ways, Roman city planning created a blueprint for how urban spaces could function efficiently. Modern cities around the world still use grid layouts for exactly the same reasons. It is another example of a Roman idea quietly surviving for thousands of years simply because it works well. Public health was another area where Roman practicality made a difference. While their understanding of disease was limited compared to modern medicine, they recognized that cleanliness and fresh air were important for maintaining healthy communities. Roman laws sometimes required proper burial practices outside city walls to prevent contamination of living areas. Water systems were carefully monitored to ensure that aqueducts remained clean and functional.
Bathhouses encouraged regular washing, which helped reduce certain types of infections even if the Romans did not fully understand why. Public fountains played a particularly important role in everyday hygiene. Because many homes lacked private water connections, citizens visited fountains throughout the day to collect water for drinking and cooking. These fountains were connected directly to aqueduct supplies, which meant the water flowing through them was often cleaner than water stored in wells or stagnant pools. The constant movement of water helped prevent contamination and allowed large populations to access fresh supplies daily. Another quiet Roman contribution involved constructing durable public spaces where people could gather safely. Forums, plazas, and open courtyards provided areas where markets could operate and citizens could meet for conversation, business, or political discussions. These spaces were usually paved with stone and surrounded by covered walkways that offered shade during hot weather or shelter during rain. The result was a comfortable environment where daily activities could continue regardless of changing conditions. Markets themselves were carefully organized environments. Different types of goods were often grouped together so that buyers could easily locate what they needed. Farmers selling vegetables might occupy one section, while fish sellers or bakers operated in another. This arrangement made trade more efficient and reduced confusion in busy commercial areas. It also allowed city officials to monitor prices, quality, and cleanliness within the marketplace. Roman engineers also paid attention to something many people rarely consider today: road markers. As the empire expanded, travelers needed reliable ways to measure distance between cities. To solve this problem, the Romans placed stone markers along major roads at regular intervals. These markers were called milestones. Each one indicated the distance to nearby towns or to the city of Rome itself. Travelers could use these markers to estimate travel time, plan overnight stops, and calculate the cost of transporting goods. The concept may seem extremely basic now, but it made long-distance travel far more predictable. Merchants could estimate how long their journeys would take. Messengers carrying important information could plan their routes carefully. Soldiers marching between forts and provinces could maintain consistent schedules. Milestones quietly transformed Roman roads from simple pathways into a coordinated transportation network. Lighting was another challenge that the Romans approached with practical thinking. While they did not have electric streetlights, they sometimes placed oil lamps along important roads or public buildings during festivals and gatherings. Wealthy homes and shops illuminated their entrances with lamps that cast light onto nearby sidewalks. While this lighting was limited compared to modern standards, it still helped make evening activities safer and more manageable within certain areas of the city. Another useful Roman idea involved building codes, although they were not always perfectly enforced. As cities grew taller and more crowded, officials recognized that poorly constructed buildings could collapse or cause fires. Regulations were occasionally introduced to limit the height of apartment buildings and encourage stronger construction methods. These early building rules were not always followed, but they represent one of the first attempts by a government to regulate urban construction for safety. Even the design of Roman entertainment spaces revealed careful planning. Amphitheaters, theaters, and circuses were built with systems that allowed thousands of people to move in and out efficiently. Multiple entrances, wide corridors, and layered seating sections ensured that large crowds could disperse without creating dangerous congestion. These designs were so effective that modern stadium architects still use similar concepts today. Education also benefited from Roman organization. While formal schools were not available to every citizen, many towns included teachers who offered instruction in reading, writing, and mathematics. Children of wealthy families often studied literature, rhetoric, and philosophy, preparing them for careers in government or law. Libraries attached to bathhouses or temples sometimes allowed citizens to access scrolls containing works of history, poetry, and science. It created a culture where knowledge could circulate through society, supported by the infrastructure that allowed ideas to travel between cities. Roads carried teachers and students. Postal systems delivered letters and manuscripts. Public spaces allowed discussions and debates. All of these elements worked together to create a network where learning could spread gradually across the empire. And so, the pattern we have been noticing throughout this journey continues to appear again and again. Roman innovation was rarely dramatic or mysterious. It was practical. It focused on solving everyday challenges faced by large populations living in busy cities. Each invention addressed a specific problem, whether that problem involved clean water, organized streets, reliable communication, or access to food and education. Individually, these ideas might seem simple, but when they were combined across thousands of towns and cities, they created one of the most organized civilizations of the ancient world. Roads connected distant provinces, aqueducts carried water into crowded neighborhoods, markets distributed food, bathhouses encouraged hygiene, postal networks delivered information across vast distances. The Roman Empire eventually declined, as all empires do. Political struggles, economic changes, and external pressures gradually weakened the system that had held the empire together. Yet many of the practical ideas developed by Roman engineers and administrators did not disappear when the empire faded. Roads continued to guide travelers, bridges continued to carry carts across rivers, aqueducts continued to deliver water long after the emperors who built them were gone. In a quiet and lasting way, the Roman habit of solving practical problems helped shape the foundation of the modern world. And as our calm journey through these inventions continues, we will soon see how some of the most ordinary Roman ideas managed to survive for centuries, influencing the way cities are built and organized even today.
As the night deepens, our imagined Roman city grows even quieter. The streets are nearly empty, and the faint trickle of water from fountains blends with the soft echo of distant footsteps. In this calm environment, it is easier to notice just how much the Romans focused on improving the ordinary details of life. They were rarely interested in flashy inventions that would impress future historians or sculptors. Instead, their genius was practical, subtle, and consistent. Roads, sewers, baths, bridges, and aqueducts were all part of a larger philosophy: solve problems for daily life, one solution at a time, and make society work just a little bit better. One area where this quiet Roman genius stands out is in the design of residential spaces. Wealthy citizens lived in villas with private courtyards, gardens, and intricate water features. But most ordinary Romans lived in insulae, multi-story apartment buildings. These were often crowded and noisy, but even so, the Romans designed them with small comforts in mind. Wide corridors allowed residents to pass each other without difficulty, and stairways provided structured access to multiple floors. Fire precautions were sometimes included, particularly in larger buildings, though enforcement was inconsistent. Residents had access to public fountains and baths nearby, ensuring that even those living in compact apartments could maintain a basic standard of hygiene. Public baths, of course, were a particularly remarkable Roman invention in terms of everyday life. They were far more than places to wash. They functioned as social hubs, libraries, exercise spaces, and relaxation centers all in one. Bathhouses were carefully engineered to maintain different temperatures. Floors were raised above ground level, allowing the hypocaust system to circulate warm air beneath, while walls sometimes contained hollow pipes to distribute heat evenly. Water flowed continuously from aqueducts, maintaining pools, baths, and fountains without interruption. The baths created a daily rhythm for Romans of all classes, a quiet routine that shaped social interaction, cleanliness, and even health across the city. Another understated Roman innovation was in food and supply management. Cities as large as Rome required careful planning to ensure that food reached millions of people reliably. Grain, olive oil, wine, and other staples were imported from distant provinces via ships and distributed through an organized network of storage facilities and marketplaces. Officials sometimes distributed grain directly to citizens through the grain dole, reducing the risk of famine and unrest.
The careful coordination of supply chains and distribution systems kept cities functioning smoothly, and while it might seem mundane today, it was crucial for maintaining stability in a population that sometimes reached over 1 million people. Transport systems continued to reflect Roman practicality. Roads connected major cities, bridges allowed safe crossings over rivers, and harbors provided secure docking for ships carrying goods across the Mediterranean. Milestones along roads informed travelers of distances to nearby towns, allowing merchants and messengers to plan their journeys efficiently. Elevated sidewalks separated pedestrians from carts, making travel safer and cleaner. Even oil lamps placed along important streets or public buildings improved visibility at night, demonstrating attention to detail in urban design. Education and information sharing were also quietly revolutionary. Schools offered basic instruction in reading, writing, and mathematics. Wealthy families might send children to study literature, philosophy, or rhetoric, preparing them for careers in law, administration, or military leadership. Public libraries and scroll repositories attached to bathhouses or temples allowed citizens to access knowledge without leaving their communities. The Acta Diurna, or daily records, provided updates on laws, political decisions, and events, displayed on public boards in busy areas. This early form of newspaper helped people stay informed and created a culture of communication and accountability. The Romans were also deeply practical about crowd management in entertainment spaces. Amphitheaters, circuses, and theaters were built to hold tens of thousands of spectators safely. Architects used multiple entrances, wide corridors, and layered seating to ensure efficient movement and prevent congestion. These careful designs minimized chaos and allowed large numbers of people to gather safely for performances, races, or public events. The principles behind these designs remain in use today in modern stadiums, proving the quiet durability of Roman planning. Public health and sanitation were other areas where Roman ingenuity quietly improved life. Sewers, such as the Cloaca Maxima, removed waste from urban centers, reducing the spread of disease. Bathhouses encouraged hygiene and social interaction, while the aqueduct system delivered fresh water to hundreds of thousands of residents daily. Burial regulations and urban planning helped prevent contamination of living areas. Even street planning, with straight roads and organized blocks, contributed to better airflow, cleaner streets, and more manageable urban life. Through all of these inventions and systems, a consistent theme emerges. Roman innovation focused on solving practical problems in everyday life, often in ways that were subtle, reliable, and enduring. Roads were not built for spectacle, but for efficient travel. Aqueducts were not ornamental, but delivered life-sustaining water. Bathhouses were not luxury items alone, but community centers supporting hygiene, relaxation, and social cohesion. And these systems were interconnected, forming a quiet infrastructure that supported millions of people across the empire. Even as Rome's political power eventually declined, the legacy of these practical solutions endured. Roads continued to guide travelers, bridges remained in use, aqueducts supplied water to growing cities, and public baths influenced the design of communal spaces in later civilizations. Cities centuries later borrowed from Roman models, often without realizing the origins of these innovations. And today, as we walk through modern urban centers, we are still surrounded by ideas first perfected quietly by Roman engineers, planners, and administrators. And as our calm journey continues through the subtle ingenuity of the Roman world, it becomes clear that the empire's most lasting legacy may not have been its emperors or armies, but its ability to improve daily life one small problem at a time. Their inventions were rarely dramatic or ostentatious, yet they shaped the way cities, infrastructure, and societies functioned for centuries to come. And as we settle deeper into this quiet exploration, we begin to see how even ordinary objects, streets, and public spaces carry the invisible imprint of Roman practicality, reminding us that true genius often works best when it quietly serves the rhythm of everyday life.
The city is now almost completely still.
Only the soft trickle of water from fountains and the occasional distant echo of a cart moving across a stone road reminds us of life continuing in the streets. And in this quiet, it becomes easier to notice the smaller inventions that the Romans quietly created, those details that often go unnoticed but profoundly shaped everyday life for centuries to come. Unlike massive aqueducts, amphitheaters, or roads stretching across continents, these innovations were subtle. They solved small problems, improved comfort, and quietly made life easier for ordinary people, leaving a legacy that lasts even today. One of the most understated Roman contributions was in the field of domestic tools and household conveniences. Romans had a keen understanding that ordinary life involved constant small challenges, from preparing food to storing it safely. They developed specialized kitchen utensils, from knives and tongs to strainers and presses, designed to make cooking more efficient. Mortar and pestle sets were common for grinding grains, herbs, and spices, and early versions of measuring tools helped maintain consistency in recipes. Wealthier homes sometimes included ovens designed to maintain steady temperatures for bread and pastries, long before the invention of modern thermostats. These were practical solutions, quietly improving daily life while remaining largely invisible to outsiders. Romans also paid attention to personal hygiene beyond the baths. Small sponges attached to sticks, known as tersoria, were used in public latrines to clean oneself, and clever drainage systems in toilets ensured that waste was removed efficiently. Soap, while not widely available, was sometimes made from animal fats and ashes to clean the body and clothing. Simple grooming tools, combs, tweezers, and razors were standard in households, reflecting a focus on comfort and cleanliness that most people today might take for granted. And all of this existed in a society where close living quarters meant that even small improvements in hygiene could make a tangible difference in daily life. Timekeeping was another area where Romans quietly shaped the way people organized their days. We have already discussed sundials and water clocks, but there were also smaller domestic tools for measuring time more practically. Portable sundials allowed travelers to track the hours on long journeys. Candle clocks, where marked candles burned at a predictable rate, helped households measure shorter intervals for cooking or timing events. These devices were not precise by modern standards, but they provided a structured sense of daily rhythm. Work, social visits, meals, and public events could all be coordinated more effectively when people had some understanding of the passage of time. Even storage solutions reflected Roman practicality. Homes and public warehouses contained jars and amphorae for storing food, wine, oil, and other liquids. These containers were carefully designed to maintain freshness, prevent spoilage, and allow easy transport. Lids, stoppers, and sealing techniques were used to keep contents safe from pests and contamination. Markets and households alike relied on these storage methods to ensure that food and drink remained usable for days, weeks, or even months. It was a simple innovation, yet crucial for urban life and long-distance trade. Lighting, though primitive by modern standards, was another quietly clever Roman invention. Oil lamps were carefully designed to burn steadily for hours without excessive smoke or soot. Public buildings and wealthy homes often included multiple lamps, providing both light and warmth. Street lighting was limited, but strategic placement of lamps at key locations improved safety and visibility for pedestrians and travelers navigating busy streets at dusk or during festivals. These small, glowing lights created a sense of continuity and order in urban life, helping the city remain functional even after the sun had set. The Romans were also practical about early tools for communication and record-keeping. Wax tablets and styluses allowed citizens, merchants, and officials to write messages, keep accounts, or take notes. These tablets could be reused by smoothing the wax, making them an early version of a sustainable writing surface. Scrolls preserved larger bodies of knowledge, from legal codes to literature, and public boards like the Acta Diurna made important information visible to everyone. Together, these tools helped ensure that both everyday tasks and civic responsibilities could be carried out efficiently, quietly reinforcing the organization of society. Even clothing reflected Roman attention to practical details. While togas and tunics are often remembered for their ceremonial or aesthetic roles, they also served functional purposes. Lightweight fabrics allowed for mobility and comfort in warm Mediterranean climates, while layering techniques provided warmth during cooler months. Wealthier citizens might have more luxurious materials, but even ordinary Romans relied on carefully tailored garments that allowed them to work, travel, and socialize effectively. Small accessories like belts, clasps, and footwear demonstrated that practicality and modest comfort were often as important as style. All of these seemingly minor inventions and practical adjustments reveal a consistent Roman mindset. Innovation was not always about grandeur, spectacle, or impressing the world. Often it was about quietly identifying recurring problems and creating solutions that made daily life smoother, safer, or more comfortable. Roads, aqueducts, and amphitheaters captured attention because of their scale, but the smaller domestic tools, timekeeping devices, hygiene implements, and storage solutions were just as important in shaping the daily rhythm of Roman society. And as our quiet journey continues through the streets, bathhouses, markets, and homes of ancient Rome, it becomes clear that the empire's influence survives not only in monumental architecture, but in the subtle, persistent details of life itself. The Romans were masters of practical problem-solving, creating systems and inventions that allowed millions of people to live, work, and socialize within a stable urban environment. Many of these ideas, from basic sanitation to urban planning, continue to inform the way cities are built and managed today. In the stillness of the Roman night, we can almost sense the invisible threads of ingenuity connecting streets, fountains, homes, and public spaces. Each small invention, each carefully organized system contributed to the quiet functioning of an empire that has long since vanished from political history, but remains vividly alive in the infrastructure, routines, and urban life that followed. And as our gentle exploration drifts forward, there are still more of these practical, quietly brilliant ideas waiting to be discovered, quietly echoing through time in ways that continue to shape the world around us.
The city is now bathed in a soft silver glow from the moon, and the faint ripple of fountains fills the quiet night air. The streets, once bustling with merchants, carts, and pedestrians, are now almost empty. In this calm, we can begin to notice another layer of Roman innovation. Not the massive aqueducts or bridges, but the systems and spaces designed purely for comfort, leisure, and social connection. Romans, it turns out, cared about more than just survival. They cared about the quality of life, and they approached this task with the same practical mindset that guided their roads, sewers, and bathhouses. One of the most visible and enduring examples of Roman attention to leisure was the amphitheater. While today the Colosseum might evoke images of spectacle and drama, in its time it was also a carefully designed public space meant to manage crowds safely and efficiently. Architects thought about how people would enter, where they would sit, and how they would leave. Multiple entrances, tiered seating, and wide corridors ensured that tens of thousands of spectators could move without chaos. The arena itself was supported by a network of tunnels, chambers, and mechanical devices that allowed stage sets, animals, or props to be moved seamlessly. It was a practical system disguised as entertainment, a place where the daily rhythms of social life and the desire for spectacle met quietly under controlled circumstances. Theaters were similar in purpose. Built with excellent acoustics and tiered seating, they allowed thousands of people to enjoy plays, recitations, or public speeches without the need for loud amplification. The careful arrangement of seating and stairways reflected an understanding of crowd psychology and human movement. It may sound mundane, but controlling large crowds safely is an achievement that many civilizations never mastered, and it is one of the quieter, more enduring contributions of Roman engineering. Circuses, like the Circus Maximus, were also designed with both function and comfort in mind. These long, open venues allowed chariot races, processions, and public celebrations to occur with minimal disruption to surrounding neighborhoods.
Seating was organized by social rank, but even ordinary citizens could find their place comfortably. Shade structures, water access, and careful entry points made these enormous public events more manageable and less chaotic. Once again, practicality met pleasure in ways that allowed large numbers of people to gather safely and enjoyably. Public gardens and open spaces reflected the same Roman attention to daily comfort. Courtyards, groves, and landscaped areas within villas and around public buildings provided shaded retreats where citizens could relax, talk, or enjoy nature without leaving the city. Water features, carefully planted trees, and paved walkways created environments that were visually calming and physically comfortable. For a society that relied on communal living, these spaces were essential. They allowed citizens to experience calm, leisure, and social interaction even within the dense urban environment. Romans also considered climate and seasonal comfort in their buildings. Homes and public spaces were oriented to maximize sunlight during colder months and shade during hotter periods. Windows were strategically placed to encourage airflow, while atriums and courtyards allowed light and ventilation to reach interior rooms. Floors were often elevated or tiled to maintain a comfortable temperature, and wealthy homes included decorative fountains that added both beauty and the soothing sound of running water. Even these small details reflected a consistent Roman approach: solve everyday problems and improve life wherever possible. And in leisure, the Romans extended their practicality to games and recreation. Board games, dice, ball games, and organized sports were common across social classes. Playing spaces were thoughtfully located within homes, villas, or public squares to prevent interference with other activities. Sports facilities often had clear boundaries, seating for spectators, and access to water and shade. Even the scheduling of public games reflected careful planning, ensuring that entertainment could be enjoyed without disrupting other aspects of civic life. All of these innovations, amphitheaters, theaters, circuses, public gardens, food distribution systems, and domestic comforts, reflect a quiet philosophy at the heart of Roman daily life. Life was organized around solving practical problems, creating spaces where people could be safe, healthy, and reasonably comfortable. Leisure was not left to chance. Even enjoyment, relaxation, and socialization were subject to thoughtful planning and engineering. In this way, the Romans were able to support a vibrant social culture while maintaining order, safety, and efficiency across the city. Citizens could enjoy entertainment, take part in public life, or simply relax without fearing chaos or disorder. These subtle innovations quietly shaped urban life across the empire, and they continue to influence modern urban planning, public spaces, and communal areas today. As we drift further into this quiet, moonlit Roman city, it becomes clear that the empire's greatest legacy was not always the monumental or dramatic, but the ordinary made orderly, and the practical made enduring. Roads, aqueducts, baths, marketplaces, and entertainment spaces all fit into a single philosophy. Life could be improved, one small innovation at a time, through careful observation, planning, and implementation. And as we settle deeper into this gentle rhythm of Roman ingenuity, the story continues, revealing even more ways the quiet, practical ideas of this civilization shaped the modern world around us.
The city now rests under the deep night sky. Moonlight casts long, gentle shadows across stone streets, and the faint trickle of aqueduct-fed fountains blends with the soft rustle of leaves in public gardens. In this quiet, we can begin to notice another layer of Roman ingenuity: the systems they built to protect health, spread knowledge, and improve life in ways that were subtle but lasting. While the Romans are often remembered for emperors, battles, and monumental architecture, some of their most enduring contributions were practical solutions that quietly supported millions of people every day. Public health was central to Roman life.
The Romans may not have understood bacteria, viruses, or the germ theory, but they recognized that cleanliness, fresh water, and proper waste management mattered. Aqueducts delivered clean water from distant mountains into the heart of cities, supplying public fountains, bathhouses, and private homes of the wealthy. Sewers, such as the Cloaca Maxima, carried waste away from streets and neighborhoods, reducing the risks of contamination. Public latrines were often connected to these sewer systems, creating a hygienic solution that was uncommon in many other civilizations. Bathhouses played a particularly important role in public health. They were more than social spaces. Regular bathing reduced the spread of skin infections, helped maintain personal hygiene, and even offered a controlled environment where illnesses could be observed and treated. Soldiers, merchants, and citizens alike used bathhouses, making hygiene a communal habit. The hypocaust heating system ensured warm floors, promoting comfort and health during colder months. By combining cleanliness with social gathering, the Romans created a public health system that worked quietly, almost invisibly, as part of daily life. Education was another area where Rome quietly improved society. While formal schools were more accessible to wealthy citizens, many towns had teachers who instructed children in reading, writing, and basic arithmetic. Wealthy families might send their children to study literature, rhetoric, and philosophy, preparing them for careers in law, administration, or government. Public libraries and scroll repositories, sometimes attached to bathhouses or temples, allowed citizens to access historical records, poetry, and technical manuals. Knowledge circulated across the empire in a structured way, aided by the roads, postal networks, and organized urban spaces that made travel and communication reliable. Even smaller educational tools reveal Roman practicality. Wax tablets and styluses allowed notes and messages to be written and erased efficiently, while scrolls preserved longer works for public or private study. These tools helped ordinary citizens, merchants, and officials manage daily tasks, keep records, and engage with literature or legal documents. Information became portable and manageable, extending learning beyond a single classroom or city. The Romans also developed practical innovations in food and nutrition that quietly improved health. Grain, olive oil, and wine were transported from distant provinces using ships and well-maintained roads. Storage containers like amphora preserved food and drink for weeks, allowing cities to maintain consistent supplies even when shipments were delayed. Markets were organized by type of goods, making it easier to find fresh produce, meats, and other necessities. Reliable access to food reduced malnutrition and social unrest, quietly supporting both public health and urban stability. Water management extended beyond aqueducts and fountains. Public baths, fountains, and private homes relied on carefully engineered plumbing systems that allowed water to flow efficiently and be reused where possible. Roman engineers even developed early forms of drainage in streets to remove rainwater and prevent flooding. Small details such as slope angles in drains and the placement of catchment basins minimized stagnation and kept urban life flowing smoothly. Fire safety, too, reflected practical thinking. The vigiles, Rome's night watch and firefighting force, patrolled neighborhoods, watching for smoke, fires, and disturbances. Equipped with buckets, pumps, hooks, and ladders, they contained fires before they could destroy entire neighborhoods. While ancient firefighting could not prevent all disasters, the Romans approached the problem systematically, combining human organization with practical tools to protect life and property. Even small conveniences reflected thoughtful design. Street lighting with oil lamps improved nighttime visibility, and raised sidewalks allowed pedestrians to navigate crowded streets without interference from carts and animals. Furniture, storage containers, and cooking utensils were designed to be functional, durable, and easy to use. Floors were sometimes elevated for airflow, while windows and courtyards encouraged natural ventilation. These were minor details individually, but together they created a city that was comfortable, organized, and relatively safe. Public leisure and communal spaces also supported well-being. Gardens, courtyards, theaters, and amphitheaters provided places to relax, socialize, and exercise. Proper crowd management, shade structures, and access to water all made public activities comfortable and safe. Even entertainment spaces, designed with tiered seating and multiple entrances, minimized stress and danger for citizens gathering in large numbers. Roman leisure spaces were not merely for pleasure, they were part of a system that integrated social, physical, and civic well-being into daily life. In this quiet, moonlit city, it is possible to see the pattern emerge clearly. Roman ingenuity was rarely flashy. It was not about spectacle or temporary solutions. It was about observing the ordinary challenges of daily life, from sanitation to communication, from food supply to leisure, and creating practical systems that addressed them efficiently. Each small innovation, each thoughtful arrangement combined to form a civilization where millions of people could live in relatively healthy, stable, and organized communities. Even as the empire slowly declined, these innovations endured. Roads continued to guide travelers, bridges supported trade, aqueducts carried water, public baths encouraged hygiene, schools and libraries preserved knowledge, markets distributed food reliably, firefighting systems protected neighborhoods, and leisure spaces maintained social and physical well-being. These practical inventions quietly survived long after the political and military might of Rome had faded, leaving a legacy that shaped the development of European cities for centuries. And so, as we drift further into the quiet night of this Roman city, it becomes apparent that the true genius of Rome was not always visible in marble monuments or epic battles. It was visible in the small, practical, and enduring solutions to daily life, solutions that improved comfort, safety, and health for millions. In this way, Rome continues to influence modern society, reminding us that sometimes the quietest inventions leave the longest-lasting marks.
The city lies almost entirely in shadow now. The streets are empty. The fountains are whispering softly, and even the occasional carriage wheels that once clattered over stone roads have disappeared into memory. In this calm, it becomes easier to appreciate another layer of Roman ingenuity, the practical transportation networks, trade systems, and everyday technologies that quietly kept the empire alive and functioning. While we often focus on battles, emperors, and grand monuments, Rome's true backbone was found in the ordinary mechanisms that allowed millions of people, goods, and information to flow smoothly across a vast empire. Roman roads are the most obvious example of transportation genius. These roads were not simply paths carved into the earth. They were carefully engineered layers of stone, gravel, and sand designed to endure centuries of use. They were crowned in the middle so that rainwater could drain efficiently to the sides, preventing erosion and mud accumulation. Milestones indicated distances to nearby towns, enabling travelers to estimate journey times and plan rest stops. Roads were maintained through organized labor, funded by the state, and carefully patrolled to ensure safety. The design was practical, precise, and largely invisible in daily life, yet it made travel, trade, and communication remarkably efficient for an ancient civilization. Roning relied heavily on these roads, but also on maritime networks. Roman harbors, built with durable concrete and protective breakwaters, allowed ships to dock safely and unload goods from across the Mediterranean. Olive oil from Hispania, grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, and pottery from Asia Minor moved consistently through this network. Trade was organized with storage facilities, warehouses, and marketplaces, ensuring that cities could rely on predictable supplies.
Merchants, officials, and citizens could plan their purchases and deliveries because the infrastructure was dependable. Even smaller transport innovations mattered. Carts, wagons, and pack animals were designed to carry heavy loads efficiently over long distances. Roads and bridges were built with gradients and widths suitable for these vehicles. River transport used boats designed for specific cargo types, and canals connected smaller waterways to larger trade routes. Each element, no matter how minor, was optimized to keep the flow of goods steady and predictable. Postal systems, which we touched on before, were another essential part of this network. The cursus publicus allowed official messages, military orders, and commercial correspondence to travel quickly across provinces. Relay stations offered fresh horses and riders, making it possible for information to move faster than any individual could travel alone. This system quietly connected cities and regions, ensuring that governance, commerce, and social organization could function over immense distances. Even small domestic technologies reflected the Roman focus on practicality. Oil lamps provided light and modest warmth, while pottery containers preserved food and liquids. Mortars and pestles, cooking utensils, and storage jars all simplified daily tasks and improved quality of life. Clothing, bedding, and simple furniture were designed for durability, comfort, and efficiency, reflecting a careful attention to detail that extended across social classes. The Romans also developed subtle innovations for communication and record-keeping. Wax tablets and styluses allowed notes, letters, and calculations to be written and erased repeatedly, while scrolls preserved larger documents. Public boards displayed important announcements, legal decrees, and civic records. Together, these tools allowed citizens to engage with administration, commerce, and culture in a structured way. Even simple inventions like these quietly shaped the functioning of an empire spanning 3 continents. Markets, too, were carefully organized. Specific areas were allocated for vegetables, meats, fish, and goods from distant regions. This reduced congestion, allowed authorities to monitor trade and taxation, and ensured that citizens could find essentials efficiently. Food storage and distribution systems supported both urban populations and armies in the field, quietly stabilizing society without fanfare or spectacle. Water management also supported transportation indirectly. Aqueducts, fountains, and plumbing provided drinking water for citizens, animals, and travelers. Roads and bridges were designed to manage runoff, prevent flooding, and maintain access during storms. Even public bathhouses played a role, offering rest, hygiene, and refreshment to travelers moving between regions. Roman engineering extended to practical leisure spaces as well. Amphitheaters, circuses, and theaters allowed thousands of spectators to gather safely, with entrances, exits, and seating arranged for efficient crowd control. Public gardens, courtyards, and plazas provided shaded, ventilated areas where citizens could meet, relax, or conduct business without leaving the city. These spaces were carefully designed to support daily life while providing comfort, safety, and social cohesion. Even smaller technological innovations supported urban life. Drainage systems in streets removed rainwater and waste. Public fountains ensured access to clean water. Sewers carried away runoff and refuse. Firefighting systems and night patrols reduced the risks of urban hazards. Each element may seem minor, but together they created a network of reliability that allowed the Roman Empire to function at a scale few ancient civilizations could achieve. The pattern is clear. Roman innovation was rarely flashy, rarely designed to impress visitors or future historians. Instead, it was practical, reliable, and focused on solving real problems. Roads, bridges, harbors, postal systems, sewers, aqueducts, and public spaces were not monuments to power. They were tools for everyday life, quietly supporting millions of people in urban and provincial settings alike. As we drift through this silent Roman night, it becomes evident that the empire's lasting legacy is not found only in battles or emperors, but in these practical, enduring systems. The roads, aqueducts, and public structures still influence city planning today. Market organization, food distribution, and public leisure spaces continue to shape how modern societies function. Even the smallest domestic inventions, from cooking tools to wax tablets, left a quiet but profound imprint on civilization. And so, as our slow, gentle journey continues, we see that Rome's greatest achievement was not always grandeur or spectacle, but the careful, persistent, and practical improvement of everyday life, an invisible legacy that continues to surround us in cities, roads, markets, and homes long after the empire itself has faded into history.
The city lies under a deep, gentle quiet now. Moonlight glints softly off the stone streets and aqueducts, and the faint murmur of distant fountains is almost hypnotic. In this calm, it becomes easier to notice the subtler side of Roman ingenuity, the ways in which engineering, architecture, and practical inventions quietly shaped daily life, creating comfort, efficiency, and stability for millions of citizens. While monuments and grand architecture often grab attention, much of Rome's enduring genius was hidden in the design of homes, streets, and everyday tools. Roman homes, whether modest apartments or sprawling villas, reflected careful attention to comfort and practicality. Wealthier citizens often had private courtyards with gardens and fountains that provided shade, ventilation, and a quiet retreat from urban noise. Atriums allowed sunlight and fresh air to enter central rooms, while carefully placed windows encouraged airflow through interior spaces. Floors were sometimes raised above damp ground to prevent moisture, and mosaics or tiles provided durable, easy-to-clean surfaces. Even small details, like the placement of storage spaces and water channels, were designed to make life smoother and more predictable. In apartment buildings, or insulae, these principles were adapted for crowded conditions. Upper floors could be cramped, but corridors and stairways were built to allow movement without excessive congestion. Access to public fountains and bathhouses ensure that even residents without private amenities could maintain basic hygiene. While fires and structural collapses were risks, building regulations occasionally limited heights and promoted stronger construction methods. These measures reflected a practical understanding of urban life and safety, quietly protecting thousands of residents. Water management was central to Roman comfort. Aqueducts delivered clean water across vast distances, feeding private homes, public baths, fountains, and even some industrial uses. Water flowed continuously through carefully constructed channels, allowing consistent supply and pressure. Engineers developed sophisticated techniques to regulate flow, prevent contamination, and maintain long-term functionality. In homes, plumbing allowed access to running water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning. And in public spaces, fountains and baths became hubs of social life and hygiene. Heating was another area where Romans applied practical engineering. Wealthy homes and bathhouses used hypocast systems to circulate warm air beneath floors and through walls. This early form of central heating allowed rooms to maintain steady temperatures even in winter months. Floors were often tiled or stone, making them durable and easy to clean, while elevated designs prevented dampness and improved comfort. Bathhouses combined heated rooms, pools, and cold rooms to create controlled environments for hygiene, relaxation, and social interaction.
Even the design of streets reflected attention to both function and comfort. Roads were built with multiple layers for durability and drainage, while sidewalks separated pedestrians from carts and animals. Street corners sometimes included small niches or fountains, providing access to water or shaded resting areas. Bridges were constructed with arches that distributed weight efficiently, allowing long-lasting crossings for travelers and trade. In all of these designs, the Romans focused on reliability and predictability, ensuring that daily life could proceed without constant interruption from natural hazards or infrastructure failure. Domestic tools and furniture also reflected practical thinking. Kitchens included mortars, pestles, and presses for preparing food efficiently. Storage containers, amphora, and lidded jars preserved food and liquids, keeping them safe from pests and spoilage. Oil lamps provided light and modest warmth, carefully designed to burn steadily with minimal smoke. Furniture was lightweight, multi-purpose, and arranged for ease of use, maximizing comfort in homes that ranged from spacious villas to smaller apartments. Even small conveniences were considered. Heating floors and tiled surfaces improved hygiene and comfort. Windows and courtyards encouraged ventilation. Furniture, beds, and storage spaces were placed to optimize movement and reduce clutter. Every detail, no matter how minor, contributed to a home that was not just functional, but also lived in comfortably, supporting the routines of daily life. Roman engineering also extended to public infrastructure that touched the lives of ordinary citizens. Sewers carried waste away from streets and homes, reducing disease and maintaining cleaner neighborhoods. Aqueduct-fed fountains provided fresh water for drinking, cooking, and bathing. Roads and bridges allowed merchants, officials, and travelers to move efficiently, supporting trade, communication, and social interaction. Public baths offered not only hygiene, but also relaxation, exercise, and communal engagement. Each element was integrated into a system designed for smooth operation, minimizing friction in the daily lives of millions of people. Even seemingly small technologies reveal Roman practicality. Timekeeping devices like sundials, water clocks, and candle clocks allowed both households and cities to coordinate activities. Postal networks and wax tablets facilitated communication across provinces. Markets were organized by type of goods, simplifying shopping and trade. Firefighting systems, night patrols, and building regulations minimized hazards in dense urban areas. Each solution addressed a specific need, quietly ensuring that life in a large empire could function with minimal disruption. What emerges from this quiet exploration is a consistent pattern. Roman innovation was rarely about spectacle alone. Monumental architecture and public displays often attract attention, but the empire's lasting influence came from solving everyday problems, creating practical systems, and improving comfort, hygiene, safety, and social interaction. Roads, bridges, aqueducts, bathhouses, housing, storage, and domestic tools all formed an interconnected network of ingenuity that quietly supported life on a massive scale. As we drift further into the gentle calm of the Roman night, it becomes apparent that the most enduring genius of Rome was practical, systematic, and unobtrusive. Its engineers, architects, and administrators were not just building monuments, they were building lives, creating cities where millions of people could live, work, and socialize efficiently and comfortably. And while the emperors, armies, and dramatic events may dominate the history books, it is these quiet, practical innovations that continue to echo through modern cities, houses, and daily routines, long after the empire itself has faded.
The city is now wrapped in near-complete stillness. Only the soft whisper of water from distant fountains and the occasional rustle of leaves in courtyards disturbs the calm night. In this quiet, we can drift deeper into one of Rome's most understated yet transformative inventions, its transportation and communication networks. While emperors and armies often dominate history books, it was the careful design of roads, postal systems, and trade routes that allowed Rome to maintain order, efficiency, and connection across a sprawling empire. Roman roads were not just long stretches of stone, they were carefully engineered systems designed to last. Layers of sand, gravel, and paving stones allowed heavy carts and foot traffic to move steadily without excessive wear. Roads were crowned in the center so that rainwater could drain to the sides, preventing mud and erosion. Milestones were placed along major routes to indicate distances to cities and towns, helping travelers plan their journeys and estimate travel time. These markers were practical, unglamorous, and entirely essential for commerce, administration, and military movement. Bridges complemented the road system. Constructed with arches that distributed weight efficiently, bridges crossed rivers and valleys with surprising stability. Many of these structures survived centuries, still in use long after the fall of the empire. Engineers carefully calculated gradients and widths to accommodate carts, pack animals, and foot traffic, ensuring consistent flow across the network. Roads and bridges together created a reliable infrastructure that allowed people, goods, and information to move across vast distances. The postal system, known as the cursus publicus, further amplified the effectiveness of Roman transportation. This official courier network connected provincial governors, military commanders, merchants, and citizens with messages and orders. Relay stations along major roads provided fresh horses and riders, enabling communication to travel faster than any single messenger could manage. Even ordinary letters could benefit indirectly from this system, as the reliability of the network supported commerce and coordination across cities and regions. Trade depended entirely on these transportation and communication systems. Olive oil from Hispania, grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, and luxury goods from the East moved predictably across the empire. Ports, roads, and rivers formed an interconnected network, while warehouses and markets allowed goods to be stored and distributed efficiently. Merchants could plan shipments with confidence, knowing that aqueducts, roads, bridges, and harbors supported the flow of materials and people. The system may sound mundane, but in a pre-industrial world, it was astonishingly effective. Even smaller innovations supported this network. Cart designs, wheel durability, and axle placement were all optimized for long journeys on stone roads. Harbor constructions included piers, breakwaters, and ramps to ease loading and unloading. Signposts, road markers, and street layouts in towns ensured that travelers could navigate efficiently. The combined effect was a network that minimized delays, reduced risk, and supported both economic and administrative activity. The integration of roads, bridges, and postal systems also influenced social life. People could travel more safely and predictably between cities, whether for business, education, or social visits. Communication was more reliable, allowing legal, administrative, and commercial transactions to occur over greater distances. Even leisure benefited, as citizens could attend festivals, games, and public events in other towns with relative confidence in their routes and accommodations. It is important to notice how quietly these systems functioned. Unlike monumental aqueducts or amphitheaters that drew attention and admiration, roads and postal networks were meant to be practical, reliable, and largely invisible in daily life. Their success was measured not by grandeur, but by consistency. Goods arrived on time, messages reached their destinations, and citizens could navigate cities and provinces without constant disruption. Even domestic life was subtly shaped by these systems. Reliable trade meant that food, wine, olive oil, and other necessities were available in urban markets. Postal systems allowed letters and business transactions to occur across distance. Roads facilitated travel to bathhouses, theaters, and forums, integrating leisure, hygiene, and social interaction into daily routines. Without these networks, city life at Rome's scale would have been chaotic, unpredictable, and far less comfortable. The underlying theme is consistent.
Roman innovation focused on solving practical problems through organized, reliable systems. Roads, bridges, postal networks, harbors, and warehouses all worked together quietly to make the empire function efficiently. Communication, travel, and trade were supported not by chance, but by careful design, planning, and maintenance. These inventions were not flashy, and they rarely appear in dramatic historical narratives, but they underpinned the very structure of Roman society. Even after the political and military structures of the empire fell, the influence of these transportation and communication systems persisted. Medieval cities built roads along former Roman routes. Bridges continued to support trade. Postal and courier networks evolved from the Roman model. Markets, warehouses, and trade routes maintained a pattern that survived centuries. The quiet, practical genius of Rome endured, embedded in the rhythms of travel, commerce, and communication across Europe. And so, as we drift further into this calm night, we begin to see the invisible architecture that truly held the Roman Empire together. It was not always monuments, conquests, or rulers that ensured Rome's lasting impact, but the subtle, enduring systems designed to allow people, goods, and information to flow efficiently across vast distances. Roads, bridges, postal networks, and trade routes quietly enabled the empire to function and left a legacy that continues to shape cities, commerce, and daily life even in the modern world.
The night has deepened further, and the streets of the city are silent, except for the soft gurgle of water from fountains and the faint whisper of wind through trees. In this quiet, we can focus on the subtler side of Roman ingenuity, the domestic inventions and household comforts that made everyday life smoother, safer, and just a little bit more pleasant. These innovations were rarely grand or visible in public spaces, but they quietly shaped the lives of millions, creating a rhythm of daily existence that was orderly, comfortable, and surprisingly sophisticated for the ancient world. Roman kitchens were small laboratories of practical design. Mortars and pestles were used to grind grains, herbs, and spices, allowing cooks to prepare food efficiently and consistently. Knives, tongs, strainers, and presses were carefully made to last and to perform specific tasks, while storage jars and amphorae preserved ingredients for weeks or months. Even in modest homes, these tools allowed households to maintain routines and prepare meals without unnecessary complications. Wealthy villas took these principles further, with larger kitchens, multiple cooking surfaces, and organized storage systems that made preparing feasts for dozens both possible and relatively smooth. Lighting in Roman homes was carefully considered. Oil lamps were the standard, designed to burn steadily and with minimal smoke. Some homes included multiple lamps placed strategically to illuminate important areas like dining rooms, corridors, and workspaces. These lamps were simple but effective, providing comfort and functionality in a world without electricity. Street lamps and public lighting complemented this, improving safety and visibility at night in neighborhoods and marketplaces. Heating was another quiet innovation. Wealthy homes and bathhouses used hypocaust systems to circulate warm air beneath floors and through walls. Floors were often raised above damp ground, reducing moisture and creating a more comfortable environment. Public baths, with their carefully maintained hot and cold pools, reflected the same attention to comfort and practicality. Even in winter months, these systems provided a reliable source of warmth and hygiene. Storage solutions were particularly important in Roman households. Amphorae, lidded jars, and cupboards were used to store food, wine, oil, and other essentials. Lids, stoppers, and sealing techniques kept contents safe from pests and contamination. In larger homes, storage rooms were often organized to separate perishable items from longer-lasting goods. Even small apartments relied on clever use of space, with shelves, containers, and raised platforms to make everyday life more manageable. Furniture and domestic layout also reflected Roman practicality. Beds were often raised to allow airflow underneath, reducing dampness. Tables, benches, and chairs were arranged to maximize movement and usability. Courtyards and atriums created open spaces within homes, providing light, ventilation, and a central area for social interaction or relaxation. Windows, doors, and passageways were placed with care, balancing privacy, accessibility, and comfort. Even minor details like the angle of a window or the width of a doorway were part of a broader philosophy of practical design. Roman clothing and personal care also contributed to household comfort. Tunics, togas, and other garments were designed for mobility and climate control. Simple grooming tools, combs, tweezers, razors were common in many households. Personal hygiene was supported by bathhouses, fountains, and private washing areas, while soap made from animal fats and ashes was occasionally available. Even small conveniences like storage for clothing and personal items reflected careful attention to the daily rhythms of life. Timekeeping, though basic, was integrated into domestic life. Sundials, water clocks, and candle clocks helped households schedule activities and coordinate with public events or marketplaces. Knowing the approximate time allowed families to plan meals, work, travel, or social visits efficiently. This subtle awareness of time contributed to a sense of order and predictability, smoothing daily routines across urban and rural areas alike. And so, in this gentle moonlit city, the picture becomes clear. Roman domestic life was shaped by thoughtful, practical innovations designed to solve everyday problems and create comfort. Kitchens, lighting, heating, furniture, storage, personal care, and timekeeping, all these elements combined to create environments that were safe, organized, and livable. These were not monumental achievements meant to impress, but quiet, functional solutions that sustained millions of citizens, from wealthy villa owners to residents of crowded apartment buildings. As we drift further into the night, it becomes evident that Rome's true genius often lay in these subtle, practical details. Roads, aqueducts, and public buildings are impressive, but it was the domestic inventions, household comforts, and small everyday systems that quietly made life possible, manageable, and comfortable. And though centuries have passed, many of these solutions, storage techniques, domestic heating, lighting, and furniture design, echo in the homes and daily routines of the modern world.